The art police was stopping me for a minute. When Michael Pierce asked me if I should be on this panel, he said that it was going to deal with the major issues for representational painting in the 21st century. And I had to give it some thought. So I think I replied 2 or 3 days later and said I would be on the panel. And what I find to be the 2 most important issues for representational painting in the 21st century is 1, that it should not represent the 21st century, and 2, that it should reject the term art. Because 1, if your work reflects your time, it will die along with it. And 2, if you base your work on fine art principles, you're basing it on principles that would have made the Renaissance impossible. So why can't there be a Renaissance basing your work on fine art principles? Because the founding fathers of art, Immanuel Kant and Hegel, German philosophers, rejected imitation as the opposite of the task of the artists, rejected sensuality as old-fashioned, rejected the sentimental and passionate expression, and rejected the eternal archetypical image. This is why Andrew Wyeth was criticized the way he was. His technique being described as formulaic, that he was caught in old master trappings, his motifs as being sentimental, magazine illustrations, and that his works represented the nostalgia of the American rural life. And, not the least, this is the reason why he was called the greatest living kitsch meister. That's a quote. I believe if you are a representational narrative painter who tries to be passionate, what is being called by critics theatrical, exaggerated emotions, and you still believe in the principle and the concept of fine art, then you are like the French noblemen singing the Marseillaise, or the revolutionary song, on their way to the guillotine to have their heads chopped off. What are the Renaissance principles, or the Greek or Roman principles? Vasari, what does he say about Raphael? He hails him as an excellent imitator. Zeuxis, the Greek painter, withdraws his painting from public view because they hail its novelty, not the quality of the work, and he perceives the audience as immature. Leonardo brags about the customer wanting to have sex with the painting that he made. So we're talking about the need to create a living image. That which Greenberg ridicules because the Russian peasant, as he says, is so impressed by the fact that it looks like life itself. It's magic. Now you can say that everything is allowed. People have to be talking about postmodernism here. But here's the dilemma. A figurative painter writes Arthur Danto, the theorist who just passed away, saying, "Why am I so criticized? I'm only trying to paint like Rembrandt." Danto's reply, "No, you can paint like Rembrandt. You just have to do it with irony because we live in our time." In other words, you can paint like Rembrandt as long as you don't paint like Rembrandt. Now, I hold the new understanding of kitsch to be the solution to this dilemma. And it's important to note that it does not represent the dichotomy of representational versus abstract painting or art, but rather that of the passionate versus the disinterested expression. That it's not a matter of changing the content, but of the connotation. And that you have to separate it very clearly from the idea of camp, which is irony. One of the things all kitsch critics agree on has no place in kitsch. Now there has been on this conference, from what I've heard, a lot of description of the contemporary art scene and what we do as painters. And there's been a lot of mocking of contemporary art. But where is the solution? If you see a children's home burning, you don't start discussing the chemical content of the smoke, saying what's so horrible it is, you know, it shouldn't be allowed. You call 911 and you go to help. The other thing that has been said is that we have to return to nature, turn to craft, as if we weren't doing that already, and that it has to be heartfelt. Now, how can that convince the critics when they are taught by Kant and Hegel to despise that? So the more heartfelt it is, the more emotional it is, the more they will hate it. That's why I hold a new understanding of kitsch to be a constructive alternative, because it is an alternative given to the critics which enables them to see the actual work, not just reject it as old-fashioned. And as Odd Nerdner was asked in the public debate once, oh, so it just becomes easier with kitsch then, you can just call it kitsch and everything's fine. And he said, no, it becomes much more difficult, because then the critics will not just reject it as old-fashioned, they will actually start looking at it and say, oh, you're trying to be sentimental. Well, does it work? No. That just looks like white paint, not like a chair. And this is the tricky part. They will really start comparing you to Rembrandt. Now, that's when you have to put your money where your mouth is. To end, there's a true story from real life, of what it can accomplish. In Norway, in 2002, there was a figurative sculptor who held a retrospective show. And the critic in a national newspaper wrote that his motifs are very sentimental, and he's not very original. And then he said, but now I have read the book on kitsch, I've understood that this is allowed in kitsch. And for the first time, that sculptor got a fair, positive review. Thank you.